What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's transfer tips for game week 7. So we're going to talk about some of the popular transfers in and out and discuss whether they are good moves or not. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you're new around here. We are trying to hit 350,000 subscribers before the end of the season. Now, I think we have to talk about Mohamed Salah first of all. I know we talked about him quite a lot, but he is a huge talking point right now. He's already been sold by over 338,000 FPL managers this week. For what it's worth, if you can, I would try and hold off on transfers. There's a lot of European matches to come this week, and I know some people will say, well, the player I'm bringing in is not in Europe, so it's not going to matter. He can only get injured in training. But obviously, if certain things happen, like other players in your team get injured, that might change your transfer strategy. So right now, for example, if Chilwell plays for Chelsea, that likely means that Cucurella is going to play at the weekend, and therefore I can probably just keep him in my team. So it will matter. So try and hold off on the transfers if you can. With Salah in particular, I think there's two angles to look at. One, should you sell him this week? Is that a mistake? And then two, should you be looking at selling him for that game week period between 8 and 11 where the fixtures are more difficult? Now, I would say for people selling him this week, it's a little bit of a mistake. I don't see Wolves at home as this fixture that we should try and avoid. I know a lot of people have pointed out that Wolves' defence has been pretty good so far this season. But if we look at the underlying numbers, the expected goals conceded, this is the matches so far. And look, against Bournemouth and Leeds, they did really well. 0.5 and 0.6 expected goals conceded. Then you look at Southampton was 1. That's okay. Fulham, 1.2. They played Spurs at 1.5. And Newcastle put 2 expected goals up against them, right? And I know that doesn't mean that it was the same amount as the actual goals they conceded. But this is a good way of trying to predict how good a defence is in the future. And given that Liverpool's attack is still pretty good, I think Wolves will find it difficult to keep them out. So if we look at Liverpool's expected goals so far this season, they haven't put up less than 1.5 against any team so far. Even if you take out Bournemouth, which is obviously a really good fixture, 2.2 in that Everton game that everyone was saying was going to be quite tough, which in some ways it was, but they still put up 2.2 non-penalty expected goals, 1.9 against Fulham. So whatever you think about Liverpool, their attack is still doing pretty well, even with the issues that we can see with midfield and stuff like that. And I don't think getting rid of Salah before Wolves at home is that smart of a choice. His personal underlying numbers, you can see on screen now, 0.42 non-penalty expected goals, 0.29 expected assists. They are now slightly down on kind of last season. I was saying a couple of weeks ago they're around the same. That's going to happen over a small sample size. We can maybe get a little bit worried about that, but I don't think we need to start panicking. The only question really is now, should we get rid of him from game week 8 onwards? And I think there's two things to think about. Is one, captaincy, and two, if you do sell him, how would you do that, right? So with captaincy, I can definitely see an argument, right? Even me, and for what it's worth, I probably am going to captain him this week, but from game week 8 to 11, probably not so much. The only week I see myself captaining him, as long as there's not other big injuries to like Haaland and players like that, is game week 9, and even that is not completely set in stone. So game week 8 is Chelsea away. I think I would definitely captain Haaland against Wolves away instead. Game week 9 is Brighton at home for Liverpool. Man City have Man United at home. Now you could definitely go for Haaland in that game. Yes, Man United are maybe improving a little bit right now, but I still think there's goals to be had for a team like Man City. So if we just have a quick look at the game weeks there. So game week 9, like I said, Liverpool are home to Brighton. You could maybe go for Haaland against Man United. And if he keeps performing as he has been, that would be a perfectly sound choice. Game week 10, Liverpool have got Arsenal away, you can see here. The same week, Man City got Southampton home. So again, even I will definitely go for Haaland that week. And then game week 11, they actually play each other, right? So it's the last game on Sunday. It's Liverpool, Man City. And again, you could go for Salah or Haaland in that game. The one that I'm eyeing up right now, I've seen a few people mention it, is possibly Fulham against Bournemouth, right? So going for Mitrovic in that game. If some of you still own Spurs players, you could possibly look at going for them against Everton at home as well. So if we're saying that possibly game weeks 8, 10 and 11, you're not going to captain him. And even game week 9, there's another option in Haaland against Man United. You could make a case to get rid of him. Now, I still don't know if I'm going to do that. What I will say is, no matter whether I sell him or not, I don't want to leave myself in a position where I cannot get him back easily, because all it takes is a couple of goals, a really good performance against someone like Chelsea or Arsenal, then the narrative will change to he's back, maybe Liverpool are looking better. Thiago Silva's also, as far as I know, back in training. Once he's back into the first 11, that should help them as well. So even if you sell him, and to be honest, I'm not going to argue massively against it. If you're not going to captain him, you can definitely make a case for selling him. Make sure you're not too stuck on trying to get him back. So then it comes down to which other premium do you go for? Because I don't think most people are going to spread the money around in a big way and just leave themselves with Haaland only. Kane is probably the best option, but he takes up a forward slot, right? So if you sell Salah to Kane and you've got Haaland, you've only got one more spot for someone like Jesus or Mitrovic or Isak or Tony and the whole host of forward options that suddenly we have this season. So if you're going to stay in midfield, it's probably someone like Sterling or Son. And I know Son hasn't done the business just yet, but if we look at Spurs fixtures, and he's down to 11.7 now, look, we're not going to do it this week, right? You keep Salah for Wolves at home rather than going for Son against Man City away. I just don't... For me, that's not even a question. Leicester at home, decent. The next two games, though, Arsenal away and Brighton away, are not going to be pushovers. I think Son can get something, but I don't necessarily see big scores. And then you've got that game week 11 fixture against Everton at home. If you did want to avoid captaining Haaland or Salah, maybe you could go for an outside punt on Son. So I would definitely agree that Kane in isolation is the better option than Son right now. It's just that forward slot I don't like taken up. So yeah, just to kind of summarise, I think it's a little, not crazy, but I don't really get the transfer out this week. I think you've got to give him Wolves at home. But from game weeks 8 to 11, if you're not going to captain him, you could definitely make a case to sell him. I don't know if I will do it yet because I'm not completely against captaining him against Brighton at home. But if at any point this season I'm going to go without Salah, it is that run from game weeks 8 to 11. I'm just not sure I'm going to bother using transfers to move him in and out. I'll probably just have him in my team. But if you want to go for it, go for it. I can't believe we were possibly a couple of inches away from McAllister having a hat-trick in the weekend. Obviously, he scored the penalty, really, really good free kick, and an absolutely banging goal that was overturned by VAR. And look, fair enough, if it's offside, it's offside, but it took so long to get to that decision. I was really hoping that he'd get given that goal because it was just so good. But either way, owners absolutely loving life right now because he got a brace, and at 5.6 million, he has returned really well so far, 6.5 points per match. Now, I don't necessarily think this is a good or a bad move. Personally, this is not someone that I would want taking up one of my midfield slots because you really are relying on those penalty returns. You look at those underlying numbers, 0.06 expected goals per 90, no expected assists per 90. He's not going to get you. He's even worse than Ward-Prowse for when it comes to open play returns. So unless they keep getting penalties or he keeps banging in direct free kicks, the returns are going to dry up. Now, he is absolutely nailed on, so he might keep ticking over with those 2 or 3 pointers when Brighton get a clean sheet, and every now and again you might get a penalty, which might make him, for his price, still a decent option. But I would personally be trying to fill that midfield slot with someone a little bit better if you can go up to like 6.5 million or even more expensive. So it's really going to come down to how much money you've got to spend, because you could argue for 5.6 or less right now, there aren't any other better midfielders than him. They're absolutely nailed on. Like if we look at the list, so I've put this to 6 million. You got Gross there. I personally think he's worth spending the extra 0.4 million on. He takes basically all the other set pieces, so any free kicks that are going to be crossed in, any kind of corners, he takes them. McAllister only seems to take the direct free kicks. At least that's what I saw from the match at the weekend. You look at the other options, like Højbjerg, are not going to go there. Xhaka, no. Podence, no. Jensen, probably not either. Andreas is obviously on, is in pretty much everyone's teams already, so he's not really much of a conversation starter. Visser doesn't get enough minutes. You can see there, last two games, 7 and 11 minutes, so he's not really an option. The two that probably stick out the most are Eze and Gordon. The problem is Eze doesn't really have the fixtures. He is getting regular minutes. He started every single game. And to be fair, Crystal Palace have played pretty well, so they could get points in the upcoming games. But Man United at home, Brighton away, Chelsea home, not exactly ideal fixtures. Although I still think I'd rather have someone like Eze than McAllister just for the excitement factor. But the fixtures aren't really there. And Gordon, who's done fairly well over the last 3, got a goal against Brentford and Leeds. He has Arsenal away, West Ham at home, Southampton away, and then Man United at home, then Spurs away. So the fixture run's not even that great. So I think given the fact that McAllister at least has Bournemouth away and Crystal Palace at home, as a short-term move in for 5.6 or less for someone that's nailed, you could go for it. But Liverpool away, Spurs at home in game week 10, I think I'd rather take Eze personally. I just need that little bit of excitement in my FPL team, someone that can get me a return from open play, and I'm just not sure McAllister is it. So I don't think people are necessarily making a mistake bringing him in, but I think their expectations need to be lowered, because unless they keep getting penalties, these returns are not going to keep happening. So Gabriel Jesus is no longer the highest owned player in FPL. That is now Erling Haaland. Jesus' ownership is a meager 77.7%. That is it, right? So still over 3/4 of the game own him. But people are still selling. 188,000 transfers out so far this week. And I feel this is a bit of a similar situation to Mo Salah. So whether you captain Salah or not, I think you should probably keep him for Wolves at home and then maybe look to get rid of him between game weeks 8 to 11 because of that fixture run. I think the same applies to Jesus. I would be looking to keep him for game week 7 and 8 and then maybe look to get rid of him from game weeks 9 to 12 where they play Spurs, Liverpool and Man City. Yes, they're all at home, but they are going to be difficult fixtures. And to be fair, Jesus has done really well. We've got to remember that Arsenal so far this season are top 3 for expected goals generated. Jesus' underlying numbers himself, 0.58 XG per 90 is higher than Mo Salah, and he has returned 6 times in 6 games, 3 goals, 3 assists. I know expectations are that he should be able to do more, but that is a pretty solid return for a player that is 8.1 million, right? And Everton at home, look, I think at some point this season, Everton might be a bit more of a difficult fixture. I think they've made some fairly good signings. Anana looks good. They've got Cody and Tarkowski in defence. But if you look at the numbers so far, that isn't really translating into defensive performances. 1 expected goals against Nottingham Forest, fair enough, but they're not exactly the best attack in the league. 1.5 against Leeds, 1.6 against Chelsea, and it just goes up and up. Brentford put 2.8 past them. I say put, obviously didn't put goals past them, but you know what I mean. They generated 2.8 expected goals, and Liverpool 2.2. So I think Arsenal can definitely go there, or not even go there, right? They're at home, but can definitely play against Everton and get 2 to 3 goals. And Jesus will almost certainly be involved. He was very, very good against Man United. He will continue to be against Everton and also against Brentford. I don't think that's a fixture that we should really worry about. Even if you think that the Brentford defence is all right, you need to kind of rate the Arsenal attack even higher because they are so good this year. And I think a lot of people do that. When I talk about a player, a lot of the times the replies are, but what about this defence? No one ever says, but what about that attack? It is so good, they're going to generate chances. So I'm all up for selling Jesus game weeks 9 to 12 and getting someone else in. And I know there's a lot of other forwards that have caught people's eyes, like the ones I've already mentioned, Tony, Isak, Mitrovic, etc. But for game weeks 7 and 8, it doesn't really get much better than Gabriel Jesus at 8.1 million. So I would avoid selling him for now. I would assume that most people have probably got a bigger priority transfer they should be making this week. So as it stands, Rashford is the most transferred in player so far this week for the whole of FPL in any position. Over 635,000 FPL managers have brought him in, and he looks like a really good option at 6.5 million. I know that's easy to say after he's just got an 18-pointer against Arsenal, but at 6.5 million, there's not a huge amount of other options. I think at this point, you've either bought Martinelli or you're just never going to do it. But obviously, if you don't have him, he probably is still a better pick than Rashford over the next 2, especially if you're looking to that game week 9 wild card. But from game week 9 onwards, the fixtures are not great for Arsenal, so you could look at Rashford instead. The other ones that people are probably looking at are Leeds players, but again, I still prefer Rashford over a Harrison or a Sinistera. And then you've got Brighton. Now again, if you're looking at a game week 9 wildcard, you could make a case that Gross or Trossard are as good options as Rashford for Bournemouth away and Crystal Palace at home. I think if you're looking a bit longer term than that, because you want a wildcard later or you've already used it, they do play Liverpool and Spurs in 9 and 10. So it's going to depend on what kind of time frame you're looking at. But I still think I'd prefer Rashford, Palace away and Leeds at home, than Trossard or Gross with Bournemouth away and Palace at home. I don't know. It's probably quite close. The only, I guess, slight concerns about Rashford, which I've spoken about before, is minutes. We knew as soon as Anthony came into Man United that he would be playing in that right wing position. I think the fact that Casemiro hasn't started yet, and yet Anthony was thrown straight in, just shows how much Ten Hag wanted him and how much he trusts him. So he's going to get regular minutes in that right wing spot. So that leaves Sancho on the left and then Rashford as the 9. Once Martial is back, I personally think once he's fit, he will take that number 9 spot back pretty quickly. I think the fact that McTominay is still playing because he's been doing well is interesting because it's kept Casemiro out right now while he kind of gets to know how Ten Hag wants to play and stuff like that. But I think with the pre-season Martial had, he already knows how he wants to play. And as good as Rashford's been, and he does have 3 goals, 2 assists so far this season, I don't think he's performed that well as a number 9. Both goals against Arsenal came from spacing behind once he'd already been moved to the left wing position. And I think as a number 9, it's not quite there for him. And obviously, once Martial comes back in, Ten Hag may well keep Rashford in the side in that left wing position. But then Sancho is always going to be there as an issue to for his place to either start or give Rashford reduced minutes by coming off. So it might not be that clear cut. You know, Antony could come off and Sancho can move to the right, etc. But I only think Rashford is an issue for minutes once Martial is back. I don't see Ronaldo starting as the number 9 anytime soon in the Premier League. We might see him get a start in the Europa League, but for Premier League, I just don't see it. So until Martial is back, which we don't know when that is, I think Rashford is perfectly fine for minutes, and I think he's a good option. I guess some people might have some concerns about how the goals are going to come if they can't get space in behind. I think all 3 of the goals so far, the one against Liverpool and the 2 against Arsenal, happened like that. Do you know what? Man City away might not be the worst fixture for someone like Rashford. Same for Leeds at home. Crystal Palace away might be a bit of a different case, but even if you remember back to that game against Brighton at home where Man United played really poorly, Rashford still had 1 or 2 pretty good chances in that game. So I think for 6.5 he looks like a good option. I think just because you compare him to the other ones, Martinelli, Trossard, Gross, you know, and then you're looking at Sinisterra, Harrison, I think Rashford might be the best option for kind of the next 2, maybe even the next 5. I might even look at bringing him in myself. Just keep an eye on his injury, because he did look like he came off with a bit of an injury. So Ten Hag will talk about that before Europe and before the Premier League game. Obviously, if he's not an option for injury, you don't buy him. But if he does look fine and he is fit, then I think he's a good option for Game Week 7. I wanted to just do a quick overview of the top 5 transfer players in and out for defenders, midfielders and forwards. We don't need to worry about goalkeepers quite so much. So the most transferred in defender is Trippier, over 437,000 transfers in already. I think he looks like a really good option. His attacking numbers are slightly up from last year as well. Newcastle defence is looking pretty good. I think for most people, the time to bring them in is Game Week 8 when they got Bournemouth at home. This week it's West Ham away, which is not quite as easy. I could see West Ham scoring in that game, but his price has already risen once this week. It could happen again before the deadline, so I may have to bring him in this week even if I bench him. So I like him. I think it's similar with Cancelo. I think double Man City defence or even one Man City defender is still good going forward. I just don't know if I would bring them in for Spurs at home. With Saliba, I would definitely think about how long term you're thinking here, because Everton at home, Brentford away are okay. Then they have that really tricky fixture run. Elsewhere, like James is the most transferred in, and even in the top 5 transferred out. I think he's a good option, although they do play Liverpool at home in Game Week 8, so keep that in mind. Trent Alexander-Arnold I would just not get rid of this week for the same reason that I wouldn't get rid of Salah. It's Wolves at home. How much have we all been burned by having Neto in our team so far this season? Wolves just struggle to score. Their new striker has just got injured. They're trying to get Diogo Costa in. The chances of him being available for the weekend, even if they can get him in the door, are kind of slim. So I don't think getting rid of Trent, I just don't think this is the right week to do it. Perisic, fair enough, difficult fixture, maybe a bit of a rotation issue going forward. With Cucurella, I would keep an eye on what happens in the Champions League. If Chilwell starts that game, I think there's almost no chance he also starts the Premier League game. So keep an eye on that. With Man United, Antony, I just wonder if it's a little bit early to bring him in. He did come off before the 60th minute against Arsenal. So as much as Ten Hag threw him straight in, obviously he does have to get his fitness up. So I like him as an option, but I do think that Rashford or Sancho could be better in the short term. Longer term might be a different story. I've already kind of mentioned the Brighton midfielders. Martinelli is obviously good for the next 2 weeks as well. I don't think any of the midfielders being transferred out are really that crazy. I think with Diaz, I own him. I'm planning to keep him for Wolves at home, but because Jota's now back, Firmino's fit as well, obviously him and Nunez for that number 9 position, Jota can play on the left. If Diaz starts, which he probably will in the Champions League, there is maybe a slight chance that he's going to miss out on the weekend, so we'll have to keep an eye out on that. He could start on the subs bench and obviously then come in. So I'm planning on keeping him, but I'm not completely against selling him this week. And then with forwards, it's pretty much as you'd expect. Tony, Mitrovic, Haaland, Kane and Isak, the most popular 5. That makes good sense. Jesus I wouldn't get rid of. Mitrovic is also in the top 5 transferred out. I don't get it. For what it's worth, I don't think he's a rush to bring in, because Chelsea at home is not necessarily a super easy fixture, although they haven't played that well this week or this season so far. But Mitrovic is a long-term option, looks great. Everybody is going to be looking to try and own him from Game Week 8. So yeah, that's the most popular transfers in and out. Let me know what you think about them. What moves are you making this week? Leave a comment below and let me know. If you have enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button, and I will catch you again soon.